you can't be afraid to just go out and try to build something, because everything around us that, we use, whether those are different products, different services, they were built by people who had the courage to just go out and do it. They just, had a vision, they had courage, and they went out and tried to execute on it. And so I think that's been one of the biggest lessons I've learned.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I am Dan, and this is a podcast treasuring the stories and lessons learned by successful entrepreneurs. Today, we're joined by Elijah Isenberger, the Chief Growth Officer and co-founder of Loom. Loom is a music discovery and streaming platform that has raised over $4 million, has over 12,000 mobile app ratings, and was founded in 2018 by Elijah and his friends at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Elijah, how are you?
Good, Dan. Good. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about Loom. What is Loom and what is your role at the company?
Yeah, so to kick things off, so Loom is, we think of it as kind of a next generation music platform that, essentially function as the home for independent artists. So it's built a little bit more around the social side, as more of a social music discovery platform, but it's also built around a suite of tools that allows music creators to, both collaborate with other creators, share content, manage their relationships with fans. And so we're really kind of playing at the intersection of, music, technology, and then this idea of the passion economy, with the ultimate goal of helping independent artists create and build stronger relationships with both other artists and fans, while also allowing them to make money in new ways outside of the traditional royalty-based business models of more traditional U.S. streaming services.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting model when you compare it to things like Spotify, but really meshing together the streaming with the social aspect is something I haven't seen before. But let's talk about your role. You're a Chief Growth Officer, right? What does that mean, and what is the responsibilities that you have to Loom?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think at its most headline, Chief Growth Officer, the ultimate responsibility is to help the business grow, right? And so, but when you dive into that on a more day-to-day basis, I've learned that it's there's a lot that goes into that, right? So, my experiences so far as being the Chief Growth Officer, which it's only been about a month and a half since I re-onboarded to the team, but it's really working kind of cross-functionally within the business with things like product development, working with our marketing team. Working directly with our CEO on kind of the more higher level, more strategic, strategic things facing the business. But then also just based on my prior experiences, both in college with the finance background, and then also just with the experience that I got in banking, I've really also kind of helped plug a gap in terms of the more kind of finance silo of the business. So helping out with kind of building the strategy around kind of just financial reporting, helping with KPI setting, helping with managing and tracking those, and then also just kind of thinking about the business a little bit more holistically in terms of what are the drivers of the business, both from a revenue perspective, a cost perspective, and how do we kind of optimize that as we look forward over the next basically the next year or so here, as we're managing kind of the rollout of some new features, some new product offerings to the platform, and how do we really think about that from a business model perspective?
Yeah, and a few things come out of that, right? So you're working for a startup, you're essentially an executive there, making some high-level decisions, seeing where the business is today, planning ahead for tomorrow, the next day to come. What is the day-to-day like, right? Is it similar to a 9-to-5 job? How often are you in the office or remote?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And it's something that has been a little interesting for me. Again, kind of coming from a background in banking, which is a little bit notorious for the work-life imbalance, I guess you could call it, where
Absolutely.
everything, everyone is online all the time. There's certain expectations around availability. But moving over to this startup, it's a little bit more of a choose your own adventure, but you also still kind of feel some of those same pressures because, as opposed for working for someone else, you're working for yourself and your team, which intrinsically from a motivational standpoint is, a bit more of a compelling reason even to put in the time, put in the energy, because you're in a race to the top against both the competitive set out there, and then also that competitive set that you don't even know exists yet. So there's always a little bit, you're operating under a bit of a finite timeline with, finite resources, and, that naturally just makes you want to put in the time and the work to make it as successful as possible, because at the end of the day, it's like, there's other people out there working just as hard, if not harder, and you don't want to find yourself, falling behind.
And that's an interesting component, right? Because if you're working for a large organization in investment banking per se, and then taking some similar skill sets and bringing it to a startup, I guess the motivation would be slightly different, as you mentioned. But Loom has grown into quite a large organization at this point. You've got 12,000 mobile app ratings, which is insane. Where do you see the business today? And as a chief growth officer, where do you see the business in the next 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the business as it stands today, I'm super proud of the strides that we've made over our short history. Launched on iOS back in July of 2019 officially, and so as you think about the platform as a whole, it's we're still a relatively new company, and we've been able to operate very effectively with a fairly lean team. But over the course of the next year or so, I see the team growing. I think that there's just some resources that we're going to need to add from a development standpoint, as we love to walk into our whiteboarding sessions and think really, really big picture, right? But it's like bringing on the additional resources so that we're able to execute on that vision in a quick enough time. I think that that'll be kind of a big part of the growth of the business moving forward. And then just as you take a step back and think about the platform as a whole, I think over the course of the next year, it's going to be a really exciting time, because we're in a spot where we're well positioned to continue to optimize and improve the core platform, both the iOS app, the Android app, and now the web platform. Getting the three of those to work symbiotically with each other as one cohesive platform. And so continuing to improve on that, but then also rolling out, additional offerings and features that, as we kind of think about it, fit perfectly within the broader Loom ecosystem, you can kind of think about it as, with the ultimate goal of, again, helping put more money in the pockets of independent artists and really building out this artist toolkit for them, to be able to operate as an independent artist effectively, and continuing to both grow their fan base, grow their brand, and start, thinking of themselves as more of a business, and being the most effective that they can be from that perspective.
When you think about the metrics that support Loom's growth as a company, what are some of the metrics that the company is focused on for growth in those years? Does it come down to revenue?
Our thinking on this topic continues to kind of evolve, because when we first started out, we had the core Loom platform. It's really easy to try to benchmark yourself against some of those more traditional, more social media metrics. Looking at stuff like monthly active users, looking at kind of total user growth. There's more traditional kind of like Facebook-y, Twitter-y type metrics. But as the business continues to evolve and we start thinking about where we are ultimately going versus where we are, the thoughts on some of those success metrics and what we really care about kind of continues to evolve. Like, I think that side of the house more, the pure sort of user count, the active user type metrics, they're going to continue to be important. But I think at the end of the day, I don't think those will necessarily be what ultimately we view as kind of the key drivers of the business and what we're super concerned about. I think we're much more concerned about the numbers of the creators on the platform, the amount of revenue that those creators are bringing in, because ultimately at the end of the day, Loom is successful when our artists are most successful. And then just also, I think a big one for us is just being able to quantify and monitor like the amount of kind of collaboration that's currently happening on the platform. Yeah.
Let's talk about how the idea sparked. Where did Loom come from, and what was it like heading into your senior year, like you told me about?
Yeah, so heading into the senior year, it was a good opportunity to just kind of take a step back and reset a little bit. Was coming off of the internship in banking, got back to campus with, full-time job offer accepted, not a lot of credits left to graduate, and so was really able to approach senior year with a little bit more of a laid-back mindset and really kind of explore some different opportunities and kind of make the experience what we wanted. And so was lucky to have a network and a group of friends on campus where entrepreneurship has always been a big interest for us. Even earlier on in college, it was always something kind of in the back of our minds that we would kick around ideas and talk about how we wanted to start our own business, that whole thing. But then, when we got back senior year, we really started taking it a little bit more seriously, I would say, and really started trying to tap into some of the resources and network that we had on campus at the time, because, we only had one more year left at school before we really had to make our entrance into the real world, you could call it. And so, we started kind of this think tank operation with other members of, the campus community, got plugged in with the entrepreneurship department at Madison, even kind of professors and faculty there. And, we just started trying to just iterate on ideas that we came up with, and we really started with a focus on what were some large industries with that were rapidly growing, kind of had some entrenched players, but that were also a bit ripe for disruption at the same time. And so there's definitely other areas that we explored a little bit, but largely I think some of the issues that we ran into initially was like either this is a little bit more capital intensive than we kind of thought, so as lean kind of bootstrapping kind of college students, like that didn't make the most sense for us, or B, the competitive set out there was already a little bit farther along than would have been ideal, so it's like we find ourselves in situations where maybe we have to play a little bit more catch up than we want to at that stage, so it didn't really make a ton of sense to chase some of those. Mm-hmm. And so we ultimately kind of landed on the music space because we saw what had happened in the industry over the past decade with this massive shift to the streaming consumption model as opposed to the digital download model that iTunes came in with and really changed the game with. But then, you also, with this shift to the streaming model, you started kind of seeing a lot of I guess, unhappy constituents, I guess you could call it, where you saw that within the streaming industry, like, yeah, it's really revolutionary and great from a consumer standpoint. You have this freedom of choice, like these huge, massive catalogs of music you can access on demand at any time. But you have this whole universe of creators out there where the big streaming services aren't necessarily built in a way to help them succeed. And, as streaming kind of became the norm, you started seeing these little, pockets of people kind of scratching their heads a little bit and being like, wait, this doesn't quite work for everybody. And so, we continued to kind of do our little bit of due diligence on the space, kind of trying to learn more. And we ultimately, settled on that space because we thought that, hey, there's a real opportunity. There's a lot of, we call it kind of the long tail of music that doesn't necessarily have, a great solution for them out there, right? It's like you get on Spotify, you get on a larger streaming service, and you could get a little bit of traction with your music, but the money that you're making off of streaming isn't enough for them to pay their bills. But they're still providing, a legitimate, digital good, right? Like music is something that we at Loom believe is valuable and should be valued, and is something important to us.
Right. A few questions kind of arise because you mentioned a think tank and really where the idea was fostered. One of the things you told me about too was the idea that Loom is essentially created off of a really interesting statistic that talks about 99% of all streams that are out there go to the top 10% of music. So if you think about Drake, Post Malone, the big players out there, then you have the remaining 90% of all streams or music, should I say, going and fighting for the top 1% of, ears, essentially. So where do you look for statistics like that? And how much structure was there behind that think tank? Was it something you guys had set up internally, or was that meetings that were set up by the university?
So I think with the first part of your question, kind of some of those broader industry statistics, um, luckily for us as well as we're going through this process, there's just a ton of great industry resources out there. Kind of like I alluded to before earlier in the podcast, it's like there's a lot of increased kind of focus and scrutiny like on the space. And so there's a lot of different kind of, industry publications, there's research organizations and groups. So there's a ton of quality information out there like that. And so, that's been something where it's like it's very public information too, and so there's a ton of great resources out there for you to kind of learn more about this disparity that's kind of going on in the music industry. And so we leaned into that like fairly heavily. Moving on to the second part of the question there, the think tank. And so I would say from the onset, it was a little bit more internal, just with students that were friends and peers kind of within our network. And then as we started getting more and more serious about taking it from ideation to actual execution, I think it was at those stages where we started leaning into the university and their resources more and more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And that brings us into, really starting the business again. Obviously, we have the idea, we've got kind of the business where it is today. But once you decided to focus on the disparity in music streaming, what was the first step that the business did take? Was it initially looking out for money, looking for funding, or building the platform? Like, what were the initial steps that Loom took?
Yeah. So I remember early on, one of the earlier steps we took, and I still look back on it pretty fondly, is we got together and we kind of took the raw idea. And I remember most kids go back home over winter break, they hang out with other friends, they go out, they party, they hang out with family or whatever. I remember over winter break, our senior year, our group literally meeting up at a central location, which happened to be one of my buddy's parents' house. And we sat over winter break and we started hammering out like a business plan. We met up every single day and started, whiteboarding out some stuff, like putting pen to paper and putting together a business plan, and even kind of planning out, some of the initial like wireframes, which are like kind of the mock-ups of the different screens of the application even too, and really started doing a lot of that pretty early on. And once we felt, pretty comfortable with where we were, we were like, hey, this thing really has some legs to it. And so from there, it became, kind of a little bit of a fundraising exercise where it's like, we believe in the idea. We think this really has some legs and can go somewhere. How effective are we at going out and convincing a few other people the same? And so we kind of set some, internal hurdles where it's like, if we can kind of raise X amount from people within our network, then we'd have enough to go out and start trying to build kind of a beta version of the platform, right? Like no one on the team at that time was really, a comp sci guy or a coder. And so initially a lot of the programming and actual creation of the platform, we leverage kind of third-party developers, which, in today's day and age is a really legitimate option for a lot of operations. If you don't have that expertise internally, like there's really cost-effective options to be able to outsource a lot of that. And so it was kind of, ideation, kind of actually putting pen to paper, going out and, kind of convincing ourselves that, kind of proof of concept, can we get others to buy in? And once we had that sort of vote of confidence with some people's, actual money behind it, then we went out and really started trying to build the thing.
Now, with that initial round of money that you raised from friends and family, was that what funded that initial beta version of the application that you eventually created? Or did you have to actually reach out to venture capitalists, angel investors to get the capital to ultimately make that happen?
I would say, especially early on, I guess even now, it's like, especially with a smaller startup like us, you're always kind of fundraising. Our CEO likes to joke, there's kind of two things you're always doing. You're always fundraising and you're always recruiting. But so at least early on in our history, it's like the fundraising aspect was kind of an ongoing process. But initially it was much more focused on kind of, friends, family with angel investors within our network. And so we haven't really, to date, we didn't really bring on a lot of more institutional capital until, a little bit later, kind of post iOS launch, and kind of in our sort of series, two, or like our seed, our second round of seed funding, essentially, is what we call it. And so, yeah, from the earliest days, it was much more, kind of angel investors, friends and family within our network, and really leveraging those to at least get us kind of the seed capital that we needed to get things off the ground.
What is it like actually, getting that money, and what is it like to work on the executive staff of a startup that's actually raised over $4 million? That's pretty impressive.
It's exciting, first off, having that sort of, tangible vote of confidence. It makes you feel really good and confident about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to build. I think also, it adds a layer of, motivation and, desire to work hard and execute, because, you're not only doing this for yourself at this point and the people that you're trying to help, which in our case, is the artists. So you also have people who have kind of put their money where their mouth is, and, have a stake in our success as well, outside of just the core team. And, you have, somewhat of a responsibility to these investors to, generate a return for them. It just adds a layer of, kind of reality to it, where it's like, hey, what we're doing here is for real. We have people that believe in us, believe in the vision, and, we just need to go out and continue to execute on that, and continue to have success.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the primary areas where Loom is investing and looking to grow in the future with those funds?
At the very highest levels, a lot of it has been kind of more, marketing spend. So, going out and trying to acquire users through kind of digital marketing channels, building out kind of product development, and building up our internal development team as well. So it's like kind of, human capital related, kind of, marketing related, like product development related. I think those are, kind of the highest level buckets that, we're currently investing in the most. I think that we've also done a really good job of, operating, relatively cash lean, where we don't really go out and spend a lot of money unless we have a really good reason to do so. We like to, plan and, do things where, we have some sort of hypothesis behind what we're doing, and then being able to go out and like test things and measure things. And so, make sure that what we are spending our money on, there's a tangible benefit, and we're able to kind of measure that tangible benefit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. When we mention the board of directors at Loom, how closely is that team sitting to your executive team, and what is it like from a requirement perspective that they ask you to deliver to them, and are there metrics that you have to hit or follow?
That's a good question. We're still in the process even to continue to build out our board of directors, but as it currently stands, our board is great. It's something that, as a young startup, that we're continuing to learn more about how to most effectively kind of leverage them, and what that does all entail, having a board of directors that you have to go to kind of on a quarterly basis and report to. And so I think a lot of that we're still kind of continuing to learn on the fly, but our board, has been great. It's been a great resource for us. And I guess kind of from a reporting standpoint, it's like, learning a bit more about kind of the more, legal side of things, and the more kind of like corporate law side of things, and like what you actually are required to deliver with, board minutes, and, putting together board presentation. Managing all that has been a fun little exercise for us internally. And I think it's something, again, we continue to learn more and more about as we, continue to operate.
As we close things up, and I'm looking at the clock here, I know we only have a few more minutes left, but what is something that you've learned along your entrepreneurial journey, even in your career, that you think is valuable to share from your experience?
I think for this, I'd share a quote that I think was pretty instrumental even earlier on when we were trying to get this thing off the ground, that I think has even stuck with me and other members of the team to this day. And it's a quote that we still bring up every once in a while now, and it's a Steve Jobs quote. But essentially, the quote reads, everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. And I think, for a lot of people, you think about entrepreneurship, you think about business, and you think it's something that's so far out of reach for you, or it's this risky endeavor that you might not necessarily think you have the chops for. This quote has always done a great job of at least keeping me grounded and keeping, I think, some other members of the team grounded, in the sense that you can't be afraid to just go out and try to build something, because everything around us that we use, whether those are different products, different services, they were built by people who had the courage to just go out and do it. And a lot of times, it's like they're people that are no smarter than you or I. They just had a vision, they had courage, and they went out and tried to execute on it. And so I think that's been one of the biggest lessons I've learned just kind of through this journey, and then even kind of some of my other career experiences, is that most people out there, we're all kind of on the same playing field for the most part. And it's just like not having fear to just go out and try something and try to build something.
100%. Well, that's some great advice, and I love Steve Jobs myself, so I can resonate with that one.
Yeah.
But Elijah, this has been an amazing conversation. Great to learn about Loom. As we wrap up, for the final remarks, where can everyone find Loom on the internet?
You can visit our website at loom.fm, LUM.fm. You can download the Android app from the Google Play Store, iOS app from the Apple App Store, of course. And then, also in the next month or so, people will be able to access our newest product offering, which is called the Exchange, which is, peer-driven creator-to-creator marketplace for music services, where artists, creators are going to be able to buy, sell, music services both safely and securely. Just another one of those, tools in the tool belt for artists to, monetize on their expertise and their specialties. So we're really excited for that too. That'll be launching here kind of mid to late January.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Elijah, and we'll talk soon, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.